afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic of this panel is deeply relevant to the work we do at ADGM Academy, as we are committed to preparing individuals for the demands of a future shaped by AI and emerging technologies. Today, we will explore how AI is transforming career paths, the skills needed to stay competitive, and the role of institutions like ADGM Academy in equipping the workforce to thrive in this evolving landscape. Dominique, as someone leading in the AI and innovation space, how do you see AI reshaping career opportunities, and what roles can educational institutes play in preparing individuals for these new pathways?
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, I spend day in, day out only really helping boards, executive teams, all sorts of executives all around the world to understand the impact of AI and the transformation that's happening. And one of the biggest surprises I always run into is the more senior the people, the less that they've played around with the technology and really gotten a great grasp on it. So a lot of what really is lacking at the moment is trainings around how to understand and use the technology, and not at a philosophical, obviously, data governance and privacy and all of these issues need to be addressed, but really just at a practical level. How do you bring it into your own personal work and everything that you do? And I think one of the things that I've realized is when you have senior executives that have actually gotten on board with the technology personally, they then know how to drive a lot of the transformation that's going to come. And one of the challenges that I see very often is that more junior people are much better at adopting the technology, starting to use it, starting to understand how do you bring it into the organization. And I see more and more senior people that are leading businesses that don't necessarily understand all of the implications or don't use it personally in their work. And I think that's where we really can focus a lot of the transformation and change on over the coming years, because the reality is there's a challenge that we like to call genius gridlock in our company, which is, you know, we all know that we need to get on board with AI, that we need to start to use it and understand it, but there is no roadmap, because this technology came out of almost nowhere 2 years ago from a personal perspective. You know, computer scientists have known about all of the evolution of technology. They're not surprised over the fact that in the last couple of years, now everyone is talking about AI because of the evolution of the technology. But the rest of us need to start to get on board with how do you use and facilitate everything that we do in our jobs with technology, and not about deep learning algorithms and machine learning, but just from a practical perspective, everything that you even just have in generative AI. Like, we train up senior executives and boards just to use the technology, and then they get very excited about it. And I think we've gotten over the period of time where you need to fear technology, because everybody needs to get on board with it. And so institutions that are helping with that upskilling, obviously 80% of all employees pretty much need to be upskilled, but the executive leadership teams also need to understand a lot of that technology and go through their own upskilling.
It's fascinating how AI is opening new doors. Let's now turn to the skills required to succeed in this evolving landscape. Professor Baldwin, from your academic and professional experience, what are the most critical AI complementary skills that individuals should develop? And how can institutions like MBZUAI and ADGM Academy collaborate to foster these skills?
Thank you for the question. Lovely to be here. So let me give a little bit of context first in terms of the institution, and then I'll actually answer the question. So at MBZUAI, Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence, at the present, we're a graduate-only school. Programs are very much focused on AI innovators. You know, we train the people who are building the models which are transforming the world. And as someone who's been in the field for 30 years, I would have to say, even 33 years ago, if you'd asked me, are we going to be where we are now, I wouldn't have predicted that we are. So even for us, it's been a bit of a surprise.
Still surprised.
Anyway, it is still a surprise. So, you know, for us, for our own students, our master's and PhD students, you know, they're very much at the bleeding edge. There's a new program we're introducing next year, more for the AI engineers, a Master of Applied AI. There's an undergraduate program for the entrepreneurs and engineers that we're also developing at the moment. And we're we're heavily engaged in external education, but very much from an AI perspective, something that I'll come back to later. So what the answer for our students versus for sort of people who are outside the sort of core AI ecosystem, I think is quite different. So, you know, for people who aren't directly hands-on involved in training the models, and to be clear, you don't need a large number of people to be hands-on training the models, as in, you know, kind of the core population, the people who are actually building these models that we're all using nowadays, you know, probably numbers in the thousands. It's no more than that, who are at that absolute apex of that pyramid globally. So, you know, for the rest of us or you, what do you really need to know? There's a lot of talk about prompt engineering, and prompt engineering is a skill that everyone should have. And what people mean by that is the ability to successfully use these models, to sort of know their ins and outs and know that, well, if I word my prompt in a particular way, I ask my question in a particular way, I'm more likely to get the sort of answer that I'm after and avoid particular wordings. And there's absolutely a role for understanding how to use the tools. You know, the skills that you know, the teenagers and the youngsters are kind of learning themselves organically by using them. Do I think that everyone needs to have training in prompt engineering? I actually don't. And the reason for that is the models we're using now versus the models we'll be using in, you know, even 6 months, but certainly 12 months, are quite different. The reason that people talk about prompt engineering now is because we have very early generation, very brittle systems where slight changes in wording mean you get very different results. That says more about the models than it does about the users, honestly. Spending a lot of time training people in how to use the current gen models, which are going to be obsolete in 12 months' time, I think is a complete waste of time. Understanding how to use them for few-shot training, for example, you know, how to get the most out of them, absolutely. But there's only so far I think you should go. And I think a second component to that is having some basic, you know, you don't have to understand the maths, you don't have to understand how to code up these models, but yeah, understanding at an intuitive level how these models are trained, you know, getting that glimpse under the hood, or looking over the shoulder of someone who's sort of looking under the hood and tinkering away at the engine, I think has immense value, because it gives you all sorts of insights into, yeah, this didn't work, but yeah, given what I know about how the models are trained, I'm not so surprised about that. And you know, just having that, as I say, intuitive understanding of the you know, the intricacies of the training dynamics to help guide you as these models are evolving, you know, over the months and years that come, so that you can perhaps be ahead of that curve and not have to be trained in prompt engineering, so that you understand, you know, given that I have some inclination or some inkling about how these models are being trained now, oh, okay, the fact that they can now do these things, I'm less surprised by.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor, and we look forward to collaborating with MBZUI on this. Let's now explore the organizational perspective. William, as a senior leader in the regulatory ecosystem, how can ADGM's initiatives and platforms support professionals in adapting to and thriving an AI-augmented workplace?
Right. I think before I start, I just want to agree with Dominic that being someone who has not been involved with AI before, getting that first hands-on experience is probably what will overcome my fear as an executive in using AI, and I've got luckily good colleagues to help me along the journey. Right? So I think within ADGM there are the formal setting that will help individuals adopt AI, and I think ADGM Academy is doing a great job at that. Because within the academy, there are sort of programs that looks at the cultural transformation, the actual technical training of AI, as well as how do we put in place the appropriate corporate governance structures to ensure that responsible deployment of AI. So that's ADGM Academy, which is a very, very structured approach to adoption of AI and training of professionals. I think within ADGM, and me wearing the lens of a regulator, there are other more practitioner-based approach to sort of encouraging adoption of AI. And let me just give you a few examples, right? I started the journey without knowing anything about AI. So the first thing we did was to try to internally get the hang of AI. We start by recruiting people who knows about AI. In the course of that knowledge transfer, we know that there's importance within the financial regulator. Before we regulate the industry, you must know what we are doing, right? So we want to come up with regulatory guidance, but before we do that, we need to put in place the safeguards internally for our use so that we can set an example for the industry. So we're quite fortunate to engage a law firm, Gibson and Dunn, to help us work with us to develop the guardrails around that. So with that, armed with that knowledge, we now sort of have some basics to understand how we want to regulate the industry. But that's not enough, right? We want to know what are the tools that are able to help the industry make use of AI to also govern the processes within their own methodologies, their own financial services activities. So let me give another example, right? We've got firms who are using machine learning as well as various algorithms that makes decisions around investments. So in order for them to do that, we do have tools that we can provide them with to help them run their algorithms. And that algorithm sort of sets out the various pitfalls, the various items for them to zoom in order for them to ensure that the AI does not suffer from things like hallucination, biasness, exclusion, and so on and so forth, right? So those are tools that we try to get the industry to make use of to test their own systems. I think finally, we want to eventually be able to come up with tools that will allow them to improve their processes around their activities. So for example, today the compliance officers struggle in terms of understanding our rules and regulations, how to navigate our regulatory requirements. So I think in due course, we should be launching some tools very soon for the industry to help them navigate our rules and regulations. And some of my colleagues have been working very hard to train the AI model, this term called the Retrieval Augmented Generative AI model that was taught to me by my colleagues. It essentially helps them, the AI, to zoom into our rules and regulations specifically for the data so that it doesn't hallucinate and give you answers that could lead you to another rabbit hole which is unintended. So I think sort of the former approach through the ADGM Academy as well as the regulators' sort of practitioner-based approach of engagement, we hope to be able to get the raise the AI professional adoption in ADGM.
Thank you, Wylam. Dominique, let's build on this with a practical perspective. What steps can individuals take to ensure they're not just adapting to AI, but also leveraging it as a tool for meaningful career advancement?
Yeah, the biggest skill set now that you can have is just being okay with not knowing where all of this is going. And I think the challenge is, really, it is. Because we don't know what skill set is even going to be needed for a lot of jobs, maybe potentially in, a couple of years. So it's being able to navigate this space, understanding that you just have to be okay with the unknown and be okay with trying and changing and using new technology. And I think a big piece of the skill set that people worry that they need is actually the technical side. And I loved what our esteemed professor had just said, which was, in essence, you don't have to be the person that's programming any of these models. We have those people. What you need to be is the executive, the person that can lead your company through that transformation and change. And if you don't understand the basics of completely agree on prompt engineering, it's too big of an idea that you have to understand exactly what phrasing to put into the systems. The systems are smarter than that, and they will continue to evolve and get better. What you have to understand is, how do you give the systems enough context and background and knowledge and understanding about your business and what you want out of the system? And how do you start to develop AI agents that will then go and start to take care of large pieces of work that you used to have to do? And if you're okay to be able to navigate in that environment, it's not necessarily, I always tell people that they should go and still study computer science and programming, not because they necessarily will have to program in the future, but there's a way of thinking. It's almost how people who work in operations, I've always been in operations. When you're in an operations role, you understand how to take something that looks incredibly complex and break it down into little micro steps. Flying a plane, you know, every switch, everything that you have to do in that role. And if you can break all of that down into micro steps, now you can start to solve it with technology. Because most technology is not going to go and solve from A to Z. Go fly the plane, figure it out as you go. Probably not a great idea. But if you can go and precisely program and work out what you need at every step and every juncture, now you can start to rewire your business. And that's what we need people to understand. We need to have them understand what technology can potentially do, and then how you can start to then innovate and transform your company. Because most CEOs aren't looking for a lot of innovation and change that is external tools that are about data and analytics and more insights on the business. Most CEOs right now, you know what they want? Optimize my business. I want fewer people, or I want more stuff that can be done even with the existing teams. And right now, we are massively underserved with experts in the industry that understand how to rewire an entire business around all of this transformation and change. I personally find it very exciting, but I think most executives are terrified. You know, if you don't have that sector expertise or you don't understand where the technology is going, like, you know, how are you going to lead through transformation and change? And so the biggest thing people can do is pretty much what you had said. You just have to try it out. You have to get yourself personally on board. It's not rocket science, because you don't have to be the one who's programming the algorithms. It's getting over that fear factor and being able to just get things started.
That's an empowering advice, Dominique. Thank you for that. Let me bounce the ball back to Wailem. As AI continues to transform industries, which sectors do you see being most affected, and how can ADGM Academy and similar platforms help professionals prepare for these shifts?
I would see industries that are centered around heavy data analytics and research would benefit a lot from AI in the first instance. But you know, if you are a user of Copilot, ChatGPT, and Perplexity, you would know it can virtually transform and raise the productivity of any industry vertical. So I think the adoption is not just the heavy data organizations, but really across the board. Finance, for sure, it's very, very transformative. Working in the financial industry, I mean, some of the use cases would be how you detect fraud, how you analyze credit, how you personalize financial services based on the person's individual profile. So the list goes on, right? So financial sector, for sure, it will be heavily impacted. I suppose health, I mean, most literature will say healthcare, because that's where a lot of diagnostics are being dependent on data. Interestingly for myself, legal and regulatory, I didn't expect it to be so transformational until I myself sort of adopt those tools internally to see how we can do most of the heavy lifting in terms of assessing our risk reports of our firms. I think I throw down the gauntlet to my colleagues that I want application to be processed within 1 day. And I think that is achievable after having tried myself. So, but the important thing is that will do the heavy lifting up front. And then for us as human beings, we still have to apply the lens and apply the judgment call at the end of the day to see what makes sense or not, right? So legal and regulatory, I suppose finally even in the retail and e-commerce space, how AI generation, AI engine has helped in the recommendation of your preferences, your biases, and your spending habits, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Wailem. To conclude our discussion, I'd like to raise a question to all of our esteemed panelists with us today. Just very quickly, if you can envision one transformative change that AI will bring to careers over the next decade, what would it be? And how can we start preparing for it today? Professor Baldwin?
Well, can I give two answers? One from an AI practitioner perspective and one from a sort of general...
As long as you don't ask AI to answer the question.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask. I know too much about the models to ask AI to answer the question. So, yeah, in terms of AI, I see ubiquity, more support, not just a handful of languages, all languages, crazy data modalities, speech, sensory information, smell, it's all data as far as we're concerned. So, I sort of see, these all encompassing models, but at the same time, more sort of vertical models for sort of very particular applications rather than the Swiss Army knives, which you have at the moment, which are, they're good for cutting, but you wouldn't use them to cook a meal, right? You'd use an actual for-purpose carving knife. In terms of the sort of more general public, I couldn't agree more with what Dominic was saying about getting on board with them, embracing the technologies rather than being afraid of the technologies, but always thinking of human in the loop, human as the center of that equation, and how to get that plus alpha, that accelerant to productivity, or cutting the timelines for doing that work using AI tools rather than how can I fire half of my office staff through AI, because I think that's not the way that we should be thinking, certainly for the next 10 years.
Dominique, what do you think?
So I am actually a firm believer that it's going to replace so many of the jobs, but my thinking is, this is a career and an industry extinction level event, because things are just going to transform so much. And I think about, for example, lawyers or accountants or very specific niche roles where people go to school for so long just to understand the principles and the language and things like law, code. And now a lot of that is going to just be transformed in terms of, well, why would you go to a person in order to understand the law if in reality you can go and just ask a system? And I love this idea of like the very niche technology that is going to be coming out, because I find that transformation is just going to be absolutely fantastically fascinating. Your biggest competitor just doesn't exist right now, and that's how fast it's all going to transform.
Last but not least, Wailem.
No, I think everyone should just be prepared for this wave. There's no avoiding it. The faster you get used to it, the faster you learn and emphasize your soft skills and let the heavy lifting of the analysis done by the AI. I think the faster you innovate to overcome the innovation of AI.
Wailem, Professor Baldwin, and Dominique, your responses have illuminated not only the immediate impact of AI on careers, but also the transformative shifts we can anticipate in the decade ahead. It's clear that while AI presents challenges, it also unlocks astonishing opportunities for innovation, growth, and collaboration across industries. Ladies and gentlemen, in Abu Dhabi, the capital of capital, we are committed to being at the forefront of this transformation, equipping individuals with the tools, skills, and mindsets needed to thrive in an AI-driven world. As we look ahead, let us embrace this era of change as a chance to reimagine our career paths and the future of work. Thank you.